Well, for more on its opposition to President Tinubu's executive order on NNPCL revenue deductions and remittance, I'm now joined by Festus Osifo. He's the president, PENGASSAN. Thank you so much, Mr. Osifo, for joining us.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you to you, and good evening to the viewers.
Indeed. Well, let's begin by understanding why you are taking this stance. The president says the goal is to increase transparency, accountability, and constitutional compliance in how oil money is handled. Why are you against that?
Yes, recently, sometime in 2021, actually, the Petroleum Industry Act was enacted. So, and if you remember, that journey took almost 2 decades for us to enact the PIA. And that particular PIA that has been enacted today, there are key provisions as stated in the Petroleum Industry Act. So, those key positions stated in the Act clearly define responsibilities. All right. So, for us, an executive order the intention of executive order is to implement the law, is to push all those who ought to act regarding a specific law for them to act. It's a call to duty. Or again, executive order could also be put in place where you don't have clarity in some rules or clarity in some laws. But in this case, you have a substantive law from the National Assembly. So first, we are not even looking at the detail of what is there in the executive order. We are first of all concerned with the process. All right? So anywhere in the world, executive order does not set aside provision of the law. Because if that happens, there becomes a lot of constitutional and a lot of issues around, the process. Because today, there are provisions in the PIA. For example, the provision, the section 8, section 9, and section 64 of the PIA. With this executive order, you are setting them aside. The danger, in fact, what has happened in the last 2-3 days, we have received a lot of calls from private entities, a lot of calls from MDs of companies, a lot of calls from practitioners and investors in this industry. They are worried. They are worried because they felt that if an executive order could set aside provision of the PIA, then tomorrow, even the provisions that protect them, that made them to be investing in Nigeria, another president could come and use an executive order and probably increase royalty. It is just as if today we have the president has signed a law, or a 2026 electoral act has been passed. All right. So tomorrow, the president cannot just wake up and use executive order and say there is no more transmission of results from polling units. He cannot use an executive order tomorrow to remove the INEC chairman, for example, without passing through the provisions of a law. So that is the first thing we are saying, that the process is wrong. So if you want to bring about any changes in PIA, you go to the National Assembly. The president is from NNPC. The majority of people in the National Assembly, the senators and the House of Reps, they belong to his party. Why can't we do the needful? Send an executive bill to National Assembly. All the stakeholders will be engaged. We will look at the cons. We will look at the pros. We will debate. Public hearing will be held. Then with that, the law can now be enacted, or the law cannot be amended. That is the right process. Because what is happening today is sending panic to the practitioners across board in the oil and gas industry. Okay, I can tell you.
Mr. Osifo, it is good that you brought up the process and the law, because there are others who argue otherwise. And they say the PIA is faulty. And let me just bring it to you. They cite Section 162, subsection 1 of the Nigerian Constitution that you and I know is the grand norm when it comes to laws in the land. That section of the Constitution, of the 1999 Constitution as amended, does create the Federation account, which also says that all revenues accrued must go into that account except for the personal income taxes of the Armed Forces, Foreign Affairs Ministry, and one other ministry. So when you look at the laws and you stated the law in taking this position, did you also put into cognizance that the Nigerian Constitution allows for this Executive Order 9 by the President?
No, we did a lot of consultation regarding this. If you look at it, for example, today, customs, the funds of customs are collected by who? They are collected by Nigeria Revenue Services, right? After Nigeria Revenue Services, as of today, collect the funds for customs, they remit to Federation account. Maybe they may have their cost of collection, all right? Today, we have universities, for example. Universities, they pay school fees. So when they pay school fees, do they pay to the Federation account? No. You have a collection system. Then at the end, the monies are collected and paid to the appropriate account. I will tell you that today, royalties today, they are paid to dedicated account that are Federation account. Then the Frontier Exploration Fund, which is already the major target of this executive order. The Frontier Exploration Fund has an account that is paid to, and it's used for a purpose, for frontier exploration. What is frontier exploration? I mean, it is carrying out exploration activities in areas outside your major catchment of Niger Delta. Carrying out exploration activities in Anambra, in Ogun, in Lagos, in Nasarawa, and the like. That is what that fund is meant for. So, those that are quoting section 162 of the Constitution, I think they have not really looked at these clearly. All the monies that are being collected today, they are still paid to the Federation account. So there is no lacuna whatsoever. Today, all the royalties, they go to Federation account. Today, all the money collected from PLC that belong to government, they go to Federation account at the end of the day. So the challenge is not about whether the money goes to Federation account or not. It goes to Federation account. So, but this is an express provision in the law. For example, the creation of the Frontier Exploration Fund, the creation of the Nigeria Midstream Downstream Infrastructure Fund. I mean, these are creations of law. Okay. So, if government now wants to remove those express provision of law, what you should do is not by executive order or it's not by executive fiat, but is by visiting the National Assembly, and they can get this done as soon as possible, because we need confidence to be in the oil and gas industry. This is not the best direction or the best way to go. Okay,
Mr. Osifo, the president also mentioned in his statement to Nigerians announcing the law that his government will take a comprehensive review of the PIA. I wonder if that allays your fears. But let me also add to it, because your statement on this position says this decision across board will lead to job losses in the oil and gas value chain. Could you explain further how this executive order would lead to job losses, and the president saying he will review, or his administration will review the PIA, if that allays your fears?
Yes, that is what should be done from the beginning. The PIA, you can review the laws of a land. There is no law that is perfect. The president, we have had in the last 1 year that the president was about to send an executive bill to the National Assembly to amend the PIA. That should be the direction. You don't put the cart before the horse. What the president should do is that take by his executive order, set up a team, look at the PIA, where there are pros, where there are cons, things you could amend in the PIA. You take the National Assembly, and all the stakeholders will come there and make their input. That is how laws are refined. And that is exactly what we want the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to do. Then now, looking at some of the specific provisions in that law, I can tell you that it has the potential of creating a lot of uncertainty in the industry. Today, the provision of a law, the executive order, it stated that 30% of the petroleum sharing contract, the 30% revenue, that 30% revenue is not accruable to government. Meanwhile, it's not actually 30% revenue. When you get revenue from PLC, you have to make some deductibles. You deduct royalties, you deduct tax, then you will also deduct cost recovery. Once you have done that, you will now have what we call profit oil or profit gas. Then that is where you now deduct 30% from. So in effect, that deduction is about 2%. It's about 2% of the revenue of the PLCs. So what that clearly means is that even the explanation that came out in the public order, I mean, during the gazetting of the public order, what came to the public is not really correct. So now, if you now remove that 2%, so the question today is that 2% is actually what NNPC uses to pay salaries and to meet some of its obligations. The one you are also removing from the midstream and downstream, it is part of what they use in meeting their internal obligations.
Okay.
So as you are removing this, how are they going to pay salaries?
Mr.
And
Osifo,
we all know when revenue dries up in an organization, the first casualty is actually the workforce. So the workers in NNPC today, they are actually endangered species. But beyond that, this also has a boomeranging effect on the entire Nigerian society. Because if the international communities, if the investors, if they lose track and they lose confidence in Nigeria, it has a way of affecting investment.
All right,
investment in oil and gas industry.
Mr. Osifo, some would say you're perhaps crying more than the bereaved here because the NNPC hasn't said anything about this executive order affecting them. And for those who have followed the law that you have been quoting, it took Nigeria almost a decade to have the PIA come into effect. Do you think Nigeria can really afford for another debate on that PIA at the National Assembly with the leakages and the opaqueness of the NNPC over the years? I mean, a lot of questions about why Labour would be against this, even though you have said you are against the process and the boomeranging effects. No,
no, for us it's very clear. We are the bereaved here. We are not crying more than the bereaved. We are the bereaved because the workers in the oil and gas industry, they are threatened. Not just in NNPC, but also the service companies in the oil and gas industry. Because if investment refuses to come, the recounts are going to reduce. And if the recount reduces, a lot of the service companies, they will not have jobs to do. And most of our members, they work in this company. So we are the bereaved. We are even much more bereaved than the NNPC itself, because if the people loses their job, I mean, we are the ones that will be directly impacted. So we are the bereaved here. So we are not crying more than the bereaved. Just to set that aside. Then what was your second question again?
Very quickly, the PIA, you're asking it to go back to the National Assembly. It took a decade to get that in the first instance.
Yes. So
with the leakages and the opaqueness of the NNPC. Very quickly, 20 seconds, please.
No. Amending a law is different from bringing the law from the beginning. Amending a law, you could recognize that this government, they have the record of amending laws as fast as possible, all right? Because all the parties, both the Senate, the House of Reps, and the President, they all belong to the same party. So amending the law does not take 10 years, all right? These laws can be amended within the next 1, 2, 3 months, where all parties will look at the issues substantively and see what can be retweaked. How can things work better? If things are not working today, what is the best way to get it done? Today, the Frontier Fund is there. Okay. Is the percentage too much? How do we retweak it? How do we redirect it? Okay. Those things can be discussed with all stakeholders carried on board, and we will all agree. So it will not take more than 2 months maximum in order for us through executive bill to tweak the PIA to suit where we ought to be as a country. But this direction that we are going, I can tell you that it is not correct. It is against the process, and it has sent shocking waves across the industry. And that we want the president to know. The president may not know everything. He's the commander-in-chief, but we felt that he was misled into signing this executive order.
All right, Mr. Festus Osifo, thank you so much for being on Newsnight. He's the president of PENGASSAN.